Hi there, I hope you and your families are all out of harm's way. As you can see today, we'll talk about more fallacies. If you recall, in the last two videos we talked about persuasion through rhetoric and some rhetorical devices used in persuasion. And then also we talked about fallacies. The difference being that in rhetoric we do not present arguments, but we try to talk people into believing what we say in a rhetorically pretty package. We then talked about fallacies and said that fallacies are the mask of arguments, in that there is an apparent premise and a conclusion which is thought to be drawn from that premise. We said, however, that there might be no link between the two. Today we'll discuss some more fallacies. Ready to start? Great. Now remember, when I tell you to pause the video, please pause the video and answer the question or questions, and then resume watching the video. One more thing before I start. Please write down your questions, as we'll have a Zoom live session on Friday from 5 to 5:40 to answer any questions you have about this chapter. Okay, let's start then. Let's have a look at the aims of the session. Now you might pause the video and have a look. These are the things that we'll be covering in today's session. Okay, let's start today's session with having a look at what President Trump said today on April 21st in a tweet. Pause the video and say whether you think this is rhetoric or a fallacy. Did you answer? Good. This is a clear example for fallacy, as there's no link between what we can consider as a premise and the conclusion. Here the premise is that 96% of approval rate in the Republican Party, and this does not necessarily mean the 96% of approval by the American public. Besides, even if it means so, how can we deduce that the public or the people of the country are happy with the performance of the federal government as far as the handling of the pandemic is concerned? Now, with that in mind, we'll start with the rest of this chapter, which is more fallacies. The first of these is Argumentum ad hominem, which is known as an attack on an opponent's character rather than answering to the contentions made. So if you make an ad hominem personal attack on your rival, you do not question what they have said, but rather the person themselves. If you do not like the guts of the coach of a rival soccer team, whatever he says makes him the target of your attack. Now, this kind of fallacy seems to be the most frequent one, especially in the world of politics. Now, during the previous presidential campaign, if you recall, in the United States, Trump did not reason against what Hillary Clinton said in some cases, but rather he kept calling her names, such as Crooked Hillary or similar things. Now you see, in Argumentum ad hominem, we focus on the characteristics of the person who makes the claim rather than the quality of the argument. Now look at these two, the picture and also the statement. So pause the video and think why this is a fallacy. Good. As you can see, if a person says, how can you make a case against smoking when you smoke like a chimney yourself? The person who says this is not attacking the arguments about smoking, but rather the person who is saying it himself or herself. Okay, now He might smoke, but does that make the arguments against smoking any weaker if he says you shouldn't be smoking? Remember, we should think of the arguments presented, not the person who's presenting it. A word of caution before we go ahead. Ad hominem fallacy does not have to be negative all the time, and we'll see that in the later slides. So if I say Mary is brilliant, this does not necessarily make her ideas brilliant. So the idea that she presents is only an idea from a brilliant person. The idea does not necessarily have to be brilliant. So if I say this is a brilliant idea as it was presented by Mary, I'm using a fallacy called Argumentum ad hominem. Okay, now let's see what types of ad hominem we have. First, I should say there are 4 different types here. Of course, we have more types, and we'll see again during this video. The first one is the personal attack ad hominem. The second one is the inconsistency ad hominem, the circumstantial ad hominem, and finally poisoning the well. Well, what is the first one? The first one was the personal attack ad hominem. So look at this picture. Pause and think about this for a minute. Okay, what's going on here? The guy in the blue jersey is aiming at the ball, right? Obviously not, but the other player's knee. You can see the personal attack ad hominem is one in which we are attributing negative quality to someone, but we are not aiming at the person's claims. Remember the example I gave you about Trump's use of crooked Hillary Clinton. Well, obviously, if Hillary Clinton has made a claim, you will have to see what the claim is and attack the claim rather than attacking Hillary Clinton. By the way, remember in chapter 4 we talked about credibility. This does not go against it. The source of what we hear makes us more cautious. So if we do not really think Hillary Clinton, for example, was very honest, you might just approach what she says with maybe more care and more suspicion. This does not justify that we attack the source of that claim. Okay, what does consistency mean? Consistency means behaving or acting in a similar way. Now look at this picture. What is the boy doing? Dropping litter. Now if he tells us that we shouldn't drop litter on the street to keep our city clean, would you believe what he's saying? You might not, but you should. Now, what would you be accused of if you said, well, he does not do what he preaches, so why would I listen to him? Now, you would be accused of inconsistency ad hominem. Now, you might be wondering why. Because you're attacking the person again. He might not be practicing what he preaches. You're right, but you would be accused of the inconsistency ad hominem, for you are rejecting what he says because it is inconsistent with what he does. Let's look at another example of, or another type of inconsistency ad hominem. If I say something, should I hold that opinion all my life? Obviously not. No. I might have an idea about something, but with the passage of time, my idea could change over the matter. Now, if you attack me for changing my opinion, you will be resorting to the inconsistency ad hominem once again. Well, some of you might be familiar with Chomsky, who started many ideas in linguistics, very pioneering ones, and throughout the years he has kept changing his opinion, but no one is attacking him for changing his beliefs or ideas. Circumstantial ad hominem is when someone attacks a claim by saying that the person making the claim is only making it because it's in his interest or because of the circumstances. If a doctor tells you that you should stop smoking for the harm it does to your health, what should you say to be accused of circumstantial ad hominem? Now pause and say what you should say to be accused of circumstantial ad hominem. Okay, did you say it? Well, so if you say, for example, he is a doctor, what do you expect him to say? Then you're resorting to this type of fallacy. Poisoning the well is a kind of forewarning, if you like, about someone. So in a sense, it's a kind of ad hominem in advance. Now, imagine someone wants to take a course with a professor, and before they want to take the course, they ask you about that professor. And you start by telling all the negative things about that professor. In a sense, you poison the person's mind against that professor. Now, you drew a monster for him, and the guy really thinks of this as a monster. Now, if the professor says something, do you think your guy is likely to accept what he says? Probably not. Well, I doubt it. Likewise, we do similar things about our students sometimes, don't we? I mean, we might talk about some of our students and how they react, and then with that preconception, we walk into the class, and obviously that's another argumentum ad hominem. Look at this tweet, another tweet by Donald Trump, but that's about 2-3 years ago. Pause the video and read it. Well, this is an example of the genetic fallacy. Calling all media, or at least a group of them, because of your history with them, is called genetic fallacy. Genetic fallacy is a fallacy of irrelevance that is based solely on someone's history or something's history or origin or source rather than its current meaning or context. Now, this overlooks any difference to be found in the present situation, typically transferring all the positive or negative steam from the earlier encounter or the context. So if we refute a policy simply because one party or organization has supported it, we are committing the genetic fallacy. If you are rejecting it because of your history with them. Now, the fallacy, we can say, fails to assess the claim on its merit, but rather rebut it because of our history with it. Now, on the next slide, I'll show you another example of this from Twitter again. Okay, here it is. Again, please pause the video, read this tweet, and then we'll discuss it. Well, as you can see here, Ben is saying that Republicans, meaning all of them, are good at stoking outrage and bad at governing. So instead of deploying tests, we get angry mobs trying to liberate states from life-saving governance. Now, look at this argument. Are all Republicans bad at governing? Do they all add fuel to the fire? Ben is actually the writer of a book, and the name of the book is The World as It Is, and it's about Barack Obama's presidency. Ironically, the name of the book, The World as It Is, suggests he is objective, but look at this tweet. Obviously, there is no element of objectivity here. Now, my reasoning might also be an example of fallacy. What was it? Stop the video and write it in the comment box. I'll read your comments later. Well, the next type of fallacy is what I've also previously mentioned very briefly. It's called the positive ad hominem fallacy. I'm sure you know these two people, Mother Teresa and Princess Diana. They were apparently very popular all over the world with a lot of people. Well, if they make any arguments, more people are likely to accept what they're saying. And why so? Because they're popular. Simply because one person is popular or is, like I said in the previous example I gave you, is creative, does not make anything they say or any idea they present creative. Unfortunately, a lot of us do this, but this is also what we need to avoid. This is another type of common fallacy that a lot of people are deceived by. Using the strawman fallacy is done when we distort or misrepresent what a person says, because if we weaken or misrepresent a person's proposition, it will be easier for us to refute it. Now, if I go to a friend and say, "Don't you want to pay me back what you owe?" And then my friend says, "So your money is more important than our friendship?" What is my friend doing here? Now, obviously he is distorting my statement. I didn't say that my money is more important than our friendship. I just wanted my money back, right? So my friend is distorting my statement. Is this not turning the argument into something cheap and maybe even impossible to defend? Because obviously I wouldn't say that money is more important than friendship. So it is actually, I mean, my friend is actually making it impossible for me to defend what I'm saying. It certainly is. So let's just look at another example. Pause the video, see what Sanders says and what John Delaney says in response. Please write your answers in the comment box below. Next, false dilemma. This type of fallacy has different names. False dilemma, black and white fallacy, either or fallacy, or a false dichotomy, are some of the names that we use when we are talking about false dilemma. Remember I gave you an example of what President Bush said after the September 11th attacks. He said, "You're either with us or against us," to the whole world. I mean, he was just, this was the speech right after the attack, and then he was addressing the whole world and the maybe heads of states. He said, "You're either with us or against us." Now, giving every country this choice is a false dilemma. Aren't there any other options? Why would you give us only two options? Can't we be neither with you or against you? So if your father tells you choose one of two options, he's committing a false dilemma. Now you can probably reason with him, but I am not suggesting that you should, because you might say goodbye to your pocket money. The perfectionist fallacy. Some of you might wonder whether we should always aim to do things perfectly. But the truth is, waiting and wanting for things to be perfect holds you back as individuals. in what you aim to achieve. This by no means means that we shouldn't plan. Of course we should plan, but we should also bear in mind that taking action as soon as we can is very important, and we shouldn't worry too much about the glitches we might face. If I ask some of you whether you have answered the question on the previous chapters and you say that, well, I should watch the video several times and read the chapter thoroughly and so on and so forth, chances are you will never do them. So start. And you get to do them one by one. So, in Perfectionist Fallacy, the premise is there is the assumption that some better or ideal solution to a problem exists. So, the conclusion will be we shouldn't take any action now until the perfect solution is found. For instance, if I say, can we get rid of poverty? You say, no, we can't eradicate poverty, therefore we shouldn't make any donations. Well, this is an example of Perfectionist Fallacy. So, should we find a solution and then make donations, or should we find the perfect or final solution and then make donations? Obviously not. So, in a sense, we should say make peace with imperfection. Okay? Okay. This is another version of either-or fallacy, line-drawing fallacy. This is when we are using some concepts which are not easy to define or are vague, if you like. Now, look at this line that I have drawn here. Usually such lines with two ends and two opposite things are called continua. So this is a continuum. On the two ends of this continuum, we have two opposite concepts, generosity and stinginess. Now, if I ask you to put a cross on this line to show where you stand, would you mark yourself nearer to the generosity end or the stinginess end? Where on this line can I say that generosity stops and stinginess starts? Or the other way around. You see the border is fuzzy, unlike that of the photo where the lines or borders for the tiles are crystal clear. Are you rich? What is that single dollar that distinguishes the haves from the have-nots? Now this can set the stage for our next fallacy, which is called the slippery slope fallacy. The slippery slope fallacy. Pause the video, please, and have a look at this argumentation. As you can see, we are arguing here that there is a chain of cause and effect going on here. This line of reasoning, when we present propositions claiming that it results in another proposition, which in turn leads to yet another, and so on and so forth, is known as the slippery slope fallacy. Remember, not all cause-effect arguments are fallacies, but they are called fallacies, if you recall from our previous videos, when we cannot establish the link between the premise and the conclusion, or the cause and the effect. For instance, who says gun control means no one will be allowed to have any guns at all? Police officers do, or the army, or I don't know, the rest of the people in law enforcement. Well, I guess this picture that we have here is self-explanatory. Please pause the video to see what you understand. Good. Did you get it? The first two pictures, I mean the ones on the top, they are fine. I mean, When you make a claim, you should prove it using premises. You are making an argument, and you are responsible for presenting premises, and then drawing a conclusion. Of course, the one who is presenting the argument usually offers some proofs for that. This is, of course, not always the case, as we shall see later. Now, imagine I say the students are not learning as effectively as they should. Therefore, we should start our face-to-face classes as soon as we can. Now, you can say, come on, it's very dangerous because of this, the coronavirus pandemic. Now, I might say, can you prove that they are learning effectively? Now, the question would be, why am I supposed to, am I supposed to prove that they are learning effectively? You presented the argument. You should prove that they are not learning effectively. Why are you putting the ball in my court, huh? As you can see, I'm putting the responsibility of proving on your shoulders. Is that right? The question here is, why do we have to prove what someone else is claiming? Now, if I ask you to give me your money to invest, you shouldn't prove why it's not wise to do so. But I should prove why it's justifiable to get your money to invest it somewhere, and why it would be lucrative in a sense. Now, sometimes, of course, we co-produce an argument. Now, I give one reason, and then you draw the conclusion out of it. The question then is, who's responsible for presenting the proof? They say there are three rules, or several rules that we can apply. One is the plausibility, the initial plausibility, which we discussed in our first video, which means how much discrepancy is there between what we know and what is presented. The second one is negative or affirmative premises. This means the person who is presenting positive arguments usually need to prove. This means we want to hear why something is the case, rather than hearing why something is not the case. So if we wish to prove the existence of ghosts, for instance, then the ones who claim that ghosts exist should present proofs, not the ones who say they don't exist. Now, if we reason the other way around, we will be accused of appeal to ignorance. The third one is the special circumstances. In some special cases or circumstances, we would like one person to be responsible for proofs. Like, for example, in a court of law, the prosecutor is usually responsible for presenting our arguments, for presenting proofs. The defendant or the advocate should not prove anything. All they have to do is stop the prosecution from succeeding. Now, this special circumstance is because of the legal system in some countries, because they believe that it would be better to let a guilty person go free than an innocent person get convicted. Now, pause the video and try to understand the line of reasoning here. Yes, well, as you can see, this means the denser the planet, the stronger the gravity is. Now, how do we know that the planet is denser? Well, they have more gravity. This line of reasoning is also known as circular argument. It's also called the vicious circle. Maybe an easier example helps better. Now, imagine there are 3 sandwiches, and I eat 2 of the sandwiches and I leave 1 for you. Then you look at me, and then I say, well, you know, I was hungrier, so I ate 2 sandwiches. And you say, who says you were hungrier? And you say, and then I say sorry because I ate 2 sandwiches. Now, what am I doing here, resorting to begging the question or the circular argument? All right, so with this point, I think we are almost there. This is what we were planning to do for this week. Okay, so have a look at the aims. I think we covered all of them. I will let you know about the assignments for this week. Please do not forget to write your comments here on YouTube, and stay home, stay safe. Goodbye.